Good afternoon. Thank you for your time today. My name is William Hahn, and I'm going to be presenting on a paper by Arel, Rose, and Karnowski entitled Deep Machine Learning, a New Frontier in Artificial Intelligence Research. So what I'd like to talk about is a bunch of different things, mainly computer vision, some discriminative models, some generative models, the idea behind feature learning, and then sort of the relationship between artificial neural networks and biological neural networks. In particular, brain mapping. Brain mapping in this last year showed itself as a key winner in the contest for segmenting very small brain images. So we'll come back to this at the end of the talk and look at how deep learning is really helping change this field. So the idea behind deep learning is when you have a complicated function, you can break that down into a bunch of little simpler functions and learn one layer at a time. And so mathematically, we encounter this a lot where we have nested functions, and we want to break this down and sort of train in each piece at a time. And so we could imagine having multi-layer neural networks where each one is made to learn a separate piece, but then we would have to have all sorts of different training and testing data. The idea behind deep learning is that you have unsupervised data and that you present the network with the data itself, and it learns to recognize patterns over time. And then what you can do is you can combine this with supervised learning, and then you can really tie these things together and give labels to the found features. So the classic example is you start with pixels, and then from there you build up edges, and then from edges you can build up simple object parts like corners and circles and things, and then finally you can get up to higher abstract representations like faces and wheels. Now, I'm going to be talking just about vision, but it's important to remember that this is inherently multimodal. Our brain is taking all sorts of sensory information together to produce our experience, and so this idea naturally extends to the multisensory domain. Now, in particular, you can imagine with speech reading, with lip reading, you're going to want to associate a particular mouth movement with a particular sound, and ideally you'd like to have the computer sort of find these relationships for you. So the idea is to build up an invariant representation. You want the network to be presented with a similar object, but to give you the same representation at the higher end. So one of the most successful ways of doing this is a convolutional neural network. And the idea behind that is essentially weight sharing. You have each pixel, essentially you have layers of filters. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take each set of filters and you're going to apply them to your image, and essentially you get more images out of it. And so you've taken your data and you've pushed it to a higher dimension, and now you can kind of sort it through, and then with max pooling you can go back down and finally rasterize it and get a vector out that you can put into a traditional neural network. So this is a very famous example of this called LeNet-5. It was by Jan LeCun. In the last few decades, they put together a lot of this great research. And as you can see, this shows an incredible robustness to the invariance of the image. I can change the thickness, the size, turn it around, and it still recognizes it. And so here you can see this is fairly old. This is from 1986, the neocognitron. And as you can see, he put a number 2 in with a light pen. And as you'll see, there's a filter banks on the left there. And the first filter is looking for horizontal lines. And you can see they show up at the top of the 2 and at the bottom. And then you detect for all the different edge orientations, and you can feed these through the layers. The idea being is that you get the last layer, you have an invariant representation. And so as this run, you can now look for the 5 has a horizontal line on the top, the middle, and then the bottom again, and you can see that in the filter weight. And then here, these will go real fast and just kind of slide around, so you can see the output is on the left is still registering as 3, even though the character itself is changing its position, its rotation, and whatnot. And so this is really important to have a computer have these representations so that if you get a unique character that it's never seen before, it has a good idea of where to put it. And so this was really big research because when the Postal Office, for example, tried to do this originally with letters, they had an expert system, but it failed miserably. They could not hard code the features. So we can do a similar thing. This is the database from Carnegie Mellon, looking at the images that you might recognize from the C project. And so the first one was with the sunglasses, and now here the same images without the sunglasses. And so another model that's mentioned in the paper is something called hierarchical temporal memory. And so this is a demo running of that. And I trained it on the 311 sunglass images, and it got these 17 wrong. But it did a pretty good job. And so here's a demonstration of this system in action. And it shows an incredible robustness to rotational invariance, to noise. You can change the brightness. You can add artifacts to this image. And what this hierarchical temporal memory has done is it's taken the input image, and it's trained it a whole bunch of times. And so here I put myself in here. And now this system has never seen my face before, and I'm asking it to see if I have sunglasses. And for the most part, it gets it right, but every once in a while, when I turn to the right, it gets it wrong and then says I'm wearing sunglasses. So you can see it's not a perfect system. Here it's claiming I am wearing sunglasses, and as you could turn it around and change the size. Now again, it's never seen this picture before. It's never seen me before. It was trained on the Carnegie Mellon set. And so this is similar. This is the deep layer network we saw with MNIST from George Hinton's group, Jeffrey Hinton's group. And we'll see in a second, this is what we looked at last week with digit recognition, where we have the input as 28 by 28 pixels, and we have a couple hidden unit layers, the top hidden layer, and then the clamps with the 10 units, which tells it this is what I know the number should be. And what's nice about this is not only can you do discriminative tasks where you ask what character this is, but you can do generative tasks where you say, show me what 2s look like. What do you think 2s look like? And so right now, it's asking, you're saying, what is this character? And it's being fed the 2, but in a second it'll turn around, and now it's saying, okay, I know that I want 2s, start to build me back up representations of 2s. So each of these hidden units, each of these squares represents the activation of a hidden unit. And so what Google did is they took a similar system. They bought that software just last year, and they trained it on YouTube. And this is a fairly famous image. On the left, they have a cat, and on the right, they had a face. So they took 10 million frames off of YouTube, and they put it in the deep belief network, and they said, what did you find? I did a similar thing with one layer of the faces from the Carnegie Mellon, the eyeglass data set, sunglasses, and this is what the first layer looked like. But again, there's no depth to this. It's just one layer of a deep belief learning. And so this is a little bit different than hierarchical learning, which a lot of other techniques use in the sense that these features depend on each other. You're not just looking for corners and then eyes. You're looking for eyes that are made up out of corners. And so this is a sort of subtle distinction here. And so the idea is that you have these edges. The very first layer finds edges. And the interesting thing is these have been found in biology, which we'll see in a little bit. And at the next layer up, you get sort of these corners. And the top layer, you can see sort of pieces of chairs and some other things. It's really beautiful if you apply it to color images, because you get these sort of nice color boundaries and then these sort of amazing prototypes of objects on the right. It's interesting. For a long time, people thought neural networks were sort of these black boxes, and the weights didn't tell you anything, but that seems to be not the case. Briefly, I want to mention sparse coding, because it's related to a lot of these properties. Don't have too much time to go into it, but it has some amazing properties, and its bigger brother, compressive sensing, seems to be one of the bigger breakthroughs in computer science in the last decade. So it seems now to move on to the biological side. These hierarchical networks are not the brain, right? The brain has a lot of pieces. Even just single neurons are extremely complicated. We can see down the bottom these dendritic spines. A lot of networks now are starting to have more computation occur in the dendrites and not just this simple addition type process. So now here's some biological evidence taken from the visual cortex region 1 of a cat. And so what they've done is they're shining this bar of light at the cat, and then these clicks you're hearing are actually the neurons firing themselves. And so it's kind of hard. It's going really fast. But if you notice, when the light beam is where the X's are in the middle, it'll fire. And when it's on the edge, it's not really firing so much. And so what they're doing is as it swipes, only in this way do you hear the click. As they go this other directions up and down, you don't get the clicks. Only when it goes back and forth like this, you get these swipes. And so this is the physiological evidence for these edge detectors that have been found in the visual cortex. They've done similar experiments where you can combine these and the higher layers, and they found that these things work together to build up these higher features. And so this is really where the deep learning idea came from in terms of biology. That you have these edge detectors, and then here they're showing you, if you put the light over the whole thing, it doesn't blink, and if you do it backwards, it'll also blink. So if you do further mapping of these things, you can find out that these orientation selectors in the brain, they have this funny sort of mapping that almost looks like a pinwheel. And the interesting thing is that if you apply a regularization scheme to the sparse coding networks, you get these same sort of swirl patterns, which is really interesting, that somehow max pooling in the neural networks is operating in the same way as these deep neural networks in the brain. So this is sort of the map that was made by Feldman and Van Essen of a macaque cortex, and so this is very difficult to make sense of this map. In a second, you'll see some more comparisons of different samples. Here, kind of as a more network view of that same picture, you can see the hierarchical layer. So V1 is all the way down at the bottom, and then you get to V2 and motion T and all these sorts of different layers of the visual cortex that do different features. And so this is kind of interesting. Without reading the labels, see if you can see which one's the human brain. There's a lot of variety in the animal kingdom, but at the same time, there's a lot that's conserved in the structure. Can anyone tell which one's human? So here again, if we look in the outer layer in the stain, this is what we call the neocortex, this very sort of outer wrinkle that's stained different in these slices. And these are the layered cortex that is of greatest interest in deep learning. This is sort of where the idea comes from. And so you can see here in these sort of neural columns here, throughout development, as the dendrites connect to different processes and sort of build this layered structure that helps make the representations. And so if we look at all the different animals in these slices of cortex, they're very much the same. It's been said there's only a few experts in the world who can actually tell these animals apart. And so there's this idea of what's called the common cortical algorithm, that essentially all of your cortex does one thing and the same thing. So we have some different layers. You can look at this structure. People have been trying to map out to see what's what and how these things really interact with each other. And what is the power? Is there something special? In fact, there's 6. So this is some work from Smith's lab in Stanford, and this is really neat. A quick fly through. In green, you see axons, in red, you see synapses, in blue, microtubules. And so this is real neocortex from a mouse. And you kind of see, so green again is axons. You'll see some cell bodies come up in a minute, sort of the bulbous things in the background. There's a cell body, and you get these sort of pyramidal cell type shapes that you see so often. And so you can see this is an incredibly complex structure. And the scale here is very, very small. We're looking at, just a millimeter or so of tissue with something called array tomography. And so what's really neat now is the neural networks are getting turned on to themselves, and that we can now use artificial neural networks to try to understand this data, to try to work backwards and say, what do we have here? How can we make sense of all this? And what can we learn from this system to help improve our deep neural networks? So this is what the raw data look like. This is from a commercial laboratory that makes the sort of imaging techniques. And so here you'll see that the computer has gone through and it's mapped out the 3D structure of a single neuron. So again, this is incredibly small, this picture. And so if you can have a computer do this thing, having a computer tell if you have sunglasses or not, that's neat, but humans can do that. These sort of tasks, humans can't do this sort of task. We need deep learning to sort of help us in this area. And then again, hopefully you could feed back and tell us how to advance the deep learning. And so this is the really, really, really small, something called serial block face scanning electron microscopy. Now this is much bigger. This is data taken here at FAU. This is magnetic resonance imaging. And so here, a much larger scale, a whole human brain. And so the last video we saw, 2.5 million of those would fit into here. And so there's just an extraordinary amount of data that we have to deal with. And the idea is, can we use deep learning to take apart these images? And so an image like this, it takes about 30 hours on a modern PC to segment, in the sense that you want to have the computer cut out the white matter from the gray matter. And so 30 hours is sort of prohibitive if you want to have sort of clinical applications of this type of mapping. And so if you take a number of individuals and you average their cortex together, you can get a sort of a map like this. And the better map we have of this, then more ideas we'll have towards deep learning, right? What is it our cortex is doing? How are we integrating all of our senses? And in particular, this segmentation task is inherently 3D. And so normally when we think of images, we think of them as being flat and we can rasterize them. But when 3D, if we rasterize them, we're losing even more information. So that's something we really don't want to do. But if we ask the computer to try to make sense of this image, it can only look at one voxel at a time. So how do we give it the sort of Gestalt psychology that humans have, where we can look at a full scene and make sense of it in a way that could help clinical diagnosis or just advanced brain mapping in general? And so just to remind you that the brain is more than a cortex. We have a lot of deep cortical structures. What do they do? It's not well understood. The cerebellum itself has as many neurons as the rest of the brain. It's not clear what it does. And so I believe these 3D maps can help us understand deep learning and vice versa, that the deep learning can help us identify structures in here, that if we can show a deep learning network 50 brains that have Alzheimer's or 50 brains that don't, and then it can identify the structures that represent those data sets, then that would be some really great breakthrough. And so that's my talk, and thank you for your time. Mm-hmm.
Visualize like human shape. Can you explain how did you visualize that?
This one with the car parts?
The human shape.
The human faces.
Visualization.
Here's one with eyes and nose. Let's find them.
The one with yourself.
Oh, this one with me?
Yes.
Okay, yes. No. You mean this?
No.
Go down.
To the right.
Yes,
No, to the right.
green shape.
Oh, this green one, yeah. Okay, so this is in MATLAB. And so free available from MATLAB is a toolbox in deep learning. And so they have a bunch of different pieces in there. But what I did is I took the first piece, and you can give it an image and ask it to train on that image. And so what I did is I gave it the Carnegie Mellon data set with the sunglasses, and that's from the C project. And I gave it that data set and asked it to train just a single layer to see what that looks like.
Which algorithm did you use?
I didn't write the algorithm. It's a deep belief network. Yeah, and it's MATLAB MathWorks has this, and so in the package is a bunch. They have a bunch of different algorithms, and this one is they call it DBN. It's the deep belief network. It's a visualization. Yeah, it's a visualization of the weights in a sense. I can show you the code if you'd like to. Of a single layer in a deep belief network. Yeah. And so it's just to, I thought it was interesting because it looks similar to the backpropagation weights that you'd get from training that set. But again, it doesn't really show you the power of the deep network in the sense that since it's just one layer, the real idea is that you do it at different scales and in a hierarchical sense so that, the idea here is you're not really getting the deepness of it. This is just a single layer just for visualization. Oh, this one actually very fast. I want to say, less than a minute or so. Yeah. So that code is available on the website, MathWorks.
Other questions?
So I saw in the beginning you almost talked about the McGregor effect.
Yeah, that's interesting. So.
Do you see a paper on deep learning that, like to make a machine do it?
Specifically with McGurk effect?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something they're interested in looking at. I don't know if they've tried to trick the computer. So if you're not aware, there's this effect where you record someone saying ba, 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 and then you record them saying va, va, va. And then you can mix the audio and the visual, and you present this to people and ask them what is their perception. And you get a bistable perception. So half the time you'll see va, 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 half the time you see ba, ba, ba. And it depends on whether you're... And yeah, so it's interesting, if you can tie these things together to have a computer sort of map these things out. But I think even this talks about the future of artificial intelligence. I think the real future is to mixing all sorts of senses, whether it's, laser range finding or, ultrasound. These things, these Mars rovers have, dozens and dozens of sensors with modalities that we really don't understand. But the computer, in some sense, could probably pull these things all together and have a shared representation so that they can work together. That's your question.
Good.
Thank you.
Very good.